Yes, thank you. Okay, I guess I will start. Thanks everyone for coming. And I hope you enjoyed the lunch and already got the coffee to wake up and speak about the most biggest buzz what we heard for the last months, right? And when I say by the buzz, I mean like the chat GPT, but obviously the whole talk is not going to be about the chat GPT. That's absolutely not intent. We're gonna look on, we will start on some overview of the AI. Just for ensuring, I'm not the data scientist, I'm the cybersecurity expert. And we got lost connection on that point. So let me see. Let's try like this. Am I good? No, yes, thanks. Just disclaimer, I'm not the data scientist, so I will not do the crash course on AI or the specific models, the differences between the AI. This is something I would encourage you to look into because that's a future. My name is Victoria. I'm the senior security architect working in the Microsoft, and primarily I focus on the cloud security and as well on the development security a lot. Some of you may have seen me speaking about the DevSecOps. So I believe this is kind of the next iteration because I want to look as well to the AI from the perspective of the developer and as from the perspective of the security expert. What's gonna wait us in the future? Yes, so we're gonna look what we got in last months and what are the risks and concerns, and then as well from this wide area we will deep into the one specific product, just to look from the security perspective as an example for the lens of the example. And then I guess I will give you some security risks in AI, what to think, and what's going to be next, and the sum of the thoughts, because at the end of the day, it's the beginning of the year, right? That's a proper time to do the predictions. Okay, so I mentioned already the ChatGPT. How many of you have used that? Okay, how many of you have heard about that? Yeah, it's hard to escape unless you're sitting somewhere in the cage or in the hut in the mountains without the internet. ChatGPT was released like a few months ago, right, in November, and it hit the buzz. And by this I mean like every single person, even non-IT person, was into that. If you go to the TikTok, it was like just flooded with the chat GPT. Technically speaking, that's a chat-based AI, which can give you answers on pretty everything, right? So, and it can help you to do some of your work. Like, for example, last week I saw even the article at NRK, which was there, the girl stated that she wrote the essay. Technically, the ChatGPT wrote the essay about the history, and she submitted that to the teachers. And that was around the discussion. So, like I mentioned, everyone jumped in. And of course, like I couldn't resist. I was like, okay, should I just save my time? I'm just preparing for the talk. And most probably you have read my abstract, and that's the reason why I'm here. And I hope you are not disappointed, but it's written by the ChatGPT. Interesting, semantically and everything, it looks appealing, right? Again, I just see plenty of people here. But I used another solution like Grammarly, maybe you are aware of it, which technically checks English syntax. And the Grammarly corrected the ChatGPT. So that abstract, the final abstract, what you saw on NDC page, is actually already corrected by the Grammarly. And of course, I was like, okay, everyone is doing the buzz, everyone is saying like, that's a nice thing. How far I can go? Maybe I just can go and transcript all my talk for today, like just the gen, the table of the content, and some text, because I'm becoming lazy, right? No, with respect to the people, I'm not following that one, and it's pretty boring, to be honest. So I was looking like on all of that, and I was like, okay, still, my talk is going to be about the cybersecurity risks in terms of AI. I'm going to ask like what the ChatGPT thinks about that, and it gave me some of the security risks, what you may have seen, and you may already have seen people trying to exploit it. So it's a pretty common list. I was like, okay. And everyone says that you could write the phishing email, which is a first entry point in today's world, right? So I was like, okay, let's write the phishing email, or actually ask the chat GPT. And not to make it boring, I was asking, like, can you write it in the German? Because I'm not sufficient in the German. And I have my colleague in Germany, and I just wanted to prank him a bit. And yeah, it looks legit. It seems that the German-speaking people told me, yeah, it looks better than these emails from the South Africa or whatsoever about the Arabian Prince, or you can imagine. It looks good. And I was like, okay, but what about the Norwegian? Yeah. I mean, to my knowledge of Norwegian, it looks as well legit, right? It looks efficient and, in that sense. So I was just a bit playing around, and by the way, you can see this was done in a few days of difference. This one is not marked as a potentially malicious, right? And this is where the OpenAI already placed some guardrails about which we're going to talk later a bit more. Obviously, it doesn't stop you or anyone else to do that stuff, like asking to write the emails, like pretend or something, and so on. And of course, with the ChatGPT, it hit all the world. It started with the regular security researchers, like once the ChatGPT was released, then the one security research actually said, like, hey, you know, I have the capture the flag contest. Can you just solve it for me? So that security research apparently is giving this challenge to his students as well, right? And no surprise, but ChatGPT was like able to explain. Yeah, side note, it's getting sometimes too annoying when it gives you plenty of the text. It just speaks a lot, right? Yeah. And it gave even the solution, with the minor thing that actually the number of the characters in the input, that was a mistake. If you go deep dive into that capture the flag context, you will notice it should be a different number. And actually, the security researcher said, like, hey, can you check? That's not legit. Maybe there's a mistake. And the ChatGPT corrected this one. This as well shows the one of the things what we're gonna discuss later, and what is called over-reliance on those type of the systems. Yeah, starting from the security researchers, like individuals, going back to the dark web, because I mean, those are guys, the first ones who want to automate their work, right? So the cybercriminal community also expressed their interest, and they started to generate the malicious code. And specifically, these are the screens, what you will find as well in different reports, and I have the links included there. So the one participant gave the two scenarios. It looks based on those scenarios that he has some technical background, and he was giving those examples just to show his maybe other participants and script kiddies how to use the ChatGPT for the building the malicious code. Like in this particular case, it's a Python script for the post-exploit information stealing. So it looks for the PDFs, collects them, compress them, and send it to the server. And then he as well went to the more advanced scenario, like just can you write me executable code, which is actually allows you. So if I look on the code, it was that it downloads SSH and Telnet client, the PuTTY, and runs it using the PowerShell. So, and going further through that thread, you can see it becomes a bit more advanced. It goes like that, okay, maybe we should build as well, you know, online bazaar and all of that stuff. So obviously, in the first of the weeks, that interest came into the play as well to the cybercrime. And when we speak about the individual security experts, and then we speak about the cybercrime, obviously the serious security companies want to get the stake in this hype as well, right? So there's a Checkpoint who has done pretty similar thing. So what they decided to look on if they can construct the full attack vector from the writing the phishing email towards like the asking for the Visual Basic macros to be implemented in Excel. And as a result, after the few iterations, especially with the code, they got some kind of the code, but they ended up actually to use later the more advanced model, which is called Codex. Have you heard about the Codex? How many of you, by the way, are developers? And how many of you are using Copilot? GitHub Copilot. Oh gosh, that's an interesting. That's an opposite towards the statistics what I have seen. And I'm going to talk about that. Then I will take this as a good excuse, because if you're using the GitHub Copilot, you may be aware of the Codex. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the Codex today. So we took the Codex, and actually they were able to develop other type of the malwares. Long story short, we see that everyone is jumping into the GPT. And to be honest, that's not something new. The reason why it took such huge hype was the level of how easy it is, right? You just go to the portal, you see that chat interface, and you write like, hey, can you educate me how to scan the network? And it gives you like, you know, the commands, the documentation. It's almost, I saw that some people were saying like, oh, it reminds me back that old feelings like when I started many years ago in IT. That's such a huge thing. So, but like I said, that's one of the main reasons why it became so popular, where it's like you almost get tired seeing everywhere the articles, YouTube content, Instagram, TikTok, you name all the social networks, and almost you want to go back to the hit, right? Just to avoid this. But again, like I said, it's not something new, but it opened that popularity of all other solutions in different fields. Like, so once you start to explore the GPT, you realize there are other different AI applications which could help you to generate text, like Copy AI. YouTubers are using that one, or even edit the videos to the extent that you can just say, please remove that person from the video. Please create that scene. Or even you can just use the AI, which transforms the things what you wrote, maybe in the Copy AI, and speaks with your voice in the video what you have created by another AI solution. And this is what you're gonna see everywhere. Like it's like the regular non-IT people starting to adopt this on the daily basis, and it opens a lot of the questions. And now I'm not speaking about even like on the more enterprise level business, right? In the security field, we already see like, I'm working personally in the Microsoft, right? And I'm dealing every day with the security solutions like the Defender for Cloud or the CM solution. And all of them are spinning up, boosted by the AI and the machine learning stuff. So that is what is happening. And as well, we see that with the release of the GitHub Copilot, some of the companies have decided that this is a nice way to boost their developers' productivity. You know, this sense that when this feature is needed, yesterday, right? That's a sprint prioritization called. So now with the Copilot, we're boosting and we're even thinking like, you know, how to produce the code for their customers. So we start to build the businesses around that. This is not the comprehensive list, it's just the one of the list what I took from the internet, and keeps evolving. It's like, I mean, you have the problem, just look at, there's already AI solution for that. I mean, have the problem with the legal, find the lawyer AI. It's in the online. So what the impacts and the risks it brings? And it brings a lot of the different risks in the different domains. I tried to structure different domains based as well on the research paper from the OpenAI, which was published in 2021. It's called LLM, so analyzing of large language models. And I will return back to that, and as well, just from the experience what we have seen. So technically speaking, it impacts the economic and the labor market risks. The developers are asking like, are we out of the job tomorrow? Again, when at the beginning of the last year in March, when we saw the DALL-E, the model produced as well by the OpenAI, which creates nice images, going crazy, the artists ask the same questions to themselves. It's like, are we out of the business right now? The copy AI, like authors. If you go to the Amazon right now and would try to buy some Kindle books, right, with electronical, I bet that some of them are written already by AI. That's how people are making money, right? So the question is like, is it going to change the labor market? Yes, is it going to change to the worse? We will see. The social and ethical risks, like the bias, discrimination, that's not new, right? We remember there was this Thai bot released when it started like to speak aggressively. Or another example, there is a service called Replica. I think it was released around like 2017. So the idea is you have the chatbot as your companion, who kind of replicates you and speaks with you about the different things. And people were happy because they could discuss the things what they couldn't discuss, for example, with wife or husband. But that solution became more, at the beginning, more flirty. And then as well, it started as well to do the harassment. I have in the reference the article which is even stated like, my AI sexually harassed me. So yeah, it opens those type of the questions, and as well like even the technical things like ChatGPT or specifically the Codex, what we're going to talk about, they even can pose those type of the risks. They may become like a bit nasty towards you by saying like, just write your own code or something like, right? Then another thing is like the legal and regulatory risks. Not speaking about the code produced, the content produced by those AIs, whom it belongs. To the authors of the model, to the owners of this data collection, or to the people who are using this service, right? And that's one thing. And another is what about the liability? What if you, working in Tesla, I don't know, just writing the code, started to use the Copilot, and it bring some mistake, which is later used in autopilot, and you crash it. Who is the responsible at the end, at the chain end? It's of course the responsibility lies on the Tesla, but further in chain. So it's a lot of the questions around the legal stuff, and we already can see there is going the case in regards of his Copilot. Around that, so that's a really interesting case, but I will not deep dive into that as well because it touches the legal ground and we have a limited time. And then another thing, like I mentioned, the over-reliance. People are just like copy-pasting, right? We used to go to the Stack Overflow and copy-paste the codes. Now we don't need to go to the Stack Overflow, right? We just go to the ChatGPT and copy-paste the codes from there. By the way, Stack Overflow has banned the AI-generated answers. Apparently, people started just, I don't know, for some reason, maybe for the ranking, to push the answers generated by AI. So people tend more and more rely on these type of the tools. But technically speaking, like for example, yesterday when I was rechecking some of the things, I asked the ChatGPT, can you summarize for me this research paper, just to refresh my memory? And it says like, yeah, obviously it's always so helpful. And it says like, yeah, those researchers are from the Ohio University. And I'm like, my memories are something else. And I just looked on the paper. No, those people are like, from the University of New York State, New York. Yeah. Anyway, so from the New York. So it gives me the wrong information by saying like, yeah, it's true. And if you don't switch on that critical thinking, if you don't switch on the fact checking, you may end up to over rely on this stuff. And then obviously it's another big trend of the political risks, like we already see the huge investments in every single country, like the China, and when Pentagon comes back and says like, oh, we need to do the investment in AI just because the China runs into that direction as well, and we need to be prepared. And then if you read this year's articles, for example, the Japan specifically is going like to invest several hundred millions into the building the cybersecurity solution based on the AI for the from to protect from the cases like it happened last year. There was the huge how the attack was, and the Toyota was compromised. So that's kind of the reaction of the Japan governance as well on that side. So, and not speaking about the other, fake news, we have seen this, we have discussed this about the Facebook and then so on. Environmental impact. That's another interesting topic, especially when the electricity goes with the prices and everything goes, up. But as well, when we are in the position of speaking about the sustainability, right? So how much carbon emissions produce your work of the, doing of preparing the model. And actually, if you get interested in those areas, because I'm deliberately skipping right now the security risks, I left it as a last, not because security is always last, but I'm going to speak a lot about that. Those ones are, honestly, OpenAI already looked on them. Like I said, that's interesting research paper, LLM analysis. It touches these ones, and they came back as well in their portal describing all of those things. How at least they try to protect from the some of these domains. So you can actually spend several hours even more into the debates or into the separate presentation for each of the domain. But today we're gonna look on the security risks. At the end of the session, I will give the kind of the more general list of the all security threats or the risks related to the AI itself, but I want to narrow it. I want to narrow it to the one specific area of the interest. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I work a lot with the developers on the development security. And I wanted to look on the GitHub Copilot because apparently developers got excited, and I got the deja vu when the DevOps came into the play. The developers were excited, like now we're gonna do the agile and develop everything, and this is how the DevSecOps started. So you get the same drill here. And I started to look on that, and I was like, okay, it seems I'm not alone. And there was some research already done, quite interesting one. And we will look on the outcome of that research. It gives some of the ideas of what we are coming to. So, like I mentioned, if we narrow down, we saw there are plenty of the different AI solutions, but most of them may end up using the OpenAI, right? The OpenAI itself, the research company, is pretty fresh. It's less than 10 years, and you see how far we got already with the AI in terms of development. It's known for the different models, but these are the three most popular models, like GPT-3. Then there is a Codex, which is more specific model for code generation. And think about this: if as a GPT-3 is a father, then the Codex is a son. So it's a kind of comes from the GPT-3, but it focuses specifically on the programming stuff. And then there is a DALL-E. By the way, these models are available for the use via OpenAI. So APIs, I do apologize, for the APIs. So you can immediately jump as of today, and actually we will jump into the Codex as well. And speaking about the Codex, why it brings the huge interest? So if you weren't into the hype, the previous hype in the IT world, or what is called the GitHub Copilot, and you missed that one, as of now, you know, it costs money, right? So it has the plans and so on. You have the alternative. You actually have the Codex, which is in the beta and is available for everyone just to use, to play around on the free trial, so to say. Like I mentioned, the Codex is the language model developed specifically for the code generation. And the most important fact here is that the Codex is the model that powers GitHub Copilot, or specifically the Codex. The next question is kind of like, yeah, but we have heard that it was trained based on the publicly available GitHub repositories, right? But do we know the size of data collection? And actually, it's not known. You will not find anywhere any statement. But then I looked a bit more carefully in that research document from the OpenAI that evaluating the large language models trained on the code. I saw they gave the example, like for example, 3 years ago, no, I should say 3 years ago almost, when they were doing this research, and specifically on Codex, and specifically for the Python only, they gave the number that it was a data set total at 159 gigabytes of the code, just a Python. It's even they wrote in the paper that's amount of the code will never be seen by the one senior developer for the whole career. So you can imagine it's quite huge. So coming back to the Codex, how does it look in the life? Like I said, a lot of those solutions are available, and let me see and hope that I may take like this. The Codex itself is available on OpenAI in the same way as a ChatGPT. You just sign up and go to the playground, and as you can see, it gives you like the interface where you, if you are into the AI stuff, on the right hand you can do the modification for the models, right? But as for me as a simple user, I can like start by saying like, okay, I'm gonna use the language Python. And like, you know, in the comment, I just say, write code, I don't know, to scan TCP network, right? Something similar what you saw in the chat GPT. Except that it doesn't talk much, it just do things, right? So it gives you the code. It gives you the code, and you can work with that code. So the idea of the Codex is to write the code, or you can just say, can you explain that code? And what it does, it looks on this code, like, you know, and it goes line by line explaining you. So it's a very useful tool for the training developers as well, in that sense. And if you just go and look even more into that, they have already some presets. Like in this case, I was a natural language to the Python, but actually what you can do, you can take your code in the Go or in the C# and translate it to the Python, for example, and then so on. So you can play around with that, and actually, if you are a bit sad that you missed the Copilot, there's a still thing like, you know, if you don't want to go for the payment plan, then the Codex is kind of the good choice to play around. So, like I mentioned, the Codex is powering GitHub Copilot. And the GitHub Copilot is the largest and the most capable model currently present. So you may see other commercial solutions. This is the most kind of the popular thing, right? And the reason why, because it was trained on the GitHub repositories. It has the largest model set. So technically, how does it look? If you go to the yes, let me see. Just go out from here and come here. So I have the Visual Studio, and I have the extension of the GitHub Pilot, and I'm just a regular developer who apparently knows something about the Python, maybe. And I start to write the code, like I need to define the logging function, and when I go, oops, it suddenly says like, oh yes, hey, look, I'm giving you the proposal of the code, and actually you either can accept it by like, clicking on the tabs, or you can just to go inside and look on the 10 other solutions. During the demo, it was we were giving 25 solutions. Now it's available like just the 10 solutions. So you can look and either accept or deny. Like so, as a regular developer, I start to develop this, and I'm like, this is my daily life, right? Right now, like okay, I just need to feel, and it's, of course, the most secure password, and so on. And I continue to work, and it's like, oh yeah, nice, fantastic. I mean, it's never been easy to become as a developer as of now, right? In the few minutes we have the results, and we have achieved what we wanted, right? How many of you are into the application development security? Okay. Who has spotted the problem here with this response? From the, I gave the hint. Correct. So technically speaking, Copilot gave me the SQL injection. And the funny fact, I specifically took this example for the one reason. Like at the beginning, I mentioned I want to speak about the one research which has been done. It's called Asleep at the Keyboard, Assessing the Security of the GitHub Copilot code contributions. Have you read that one or not? No, that's a really nice one. So there are the security researchers from the New York University and the University of the Calgary. They analyzed the security of the code contributions made by the GitHub Copilot. And they took this example, that particular code, when the Copilot was released, like it's almost 2 years ago, right? And then 5 months ago, we spoke at the Black Hat conference. If you are not into the reading the paper, I have the link to the GitHub, to the Black Hat conference, just to look on that. And apparently it still worked. And today we checked, it's still, Copilot is giving you the SQL injection. That's cool. I mean, not cool, but think about the junior developers, right? They are like, oh, that's cool. I done my boilerplate code work, and I'm getting money, and I have still four hours to do for something else more. Anyways, so those researchers wanted to, and it's actually begun from that code. The guy was playing around with the Copilot, and that's the first thing what he got, and he was started to wondering like, okay, how secure that code is, what the code snippets given by the Copilot. So what they did, I will just give the brief examples, I will not go into the deep dive, but what they did, they looked through the 3 dimensions. The first is the diversity of the weaknesses. So what is the difference of different types of the vulnerability if they are diversity of the prompt. So do changes to prompt change the rate of the vulnerabilities, and that's my favorite one, especially the outcomes. And then the diversity of the domain, because at the releasing time, Copilot or the GitHub stated, we speak any programming language. And they did that. They tried the one of the hardware languages. I will leave it out of the scope. Just need to give something interesting for you to motivate to read that. And they took the several metrics. Obviously, the first one, that the suggestion should be valid, right? It should, the code should run. The second is that the suggestion should be vulnerable. And remember, vulnerable doesn't mean exploitable. I mean, you saw the SQL injection, but doesn't mean that my code is going to be exploitable. And if the top suggestion was vulnerable, that's the primary thing. So the way how we did, we took and we were basically basing all the research on what is called Common Weakness Enumeration Database from the MITRE. So we took these top 25 CVEs, but actually we selected, I think, 18 due to the nature, how do you check, and some of them requires, it's more like, the logical ones. They developed the scenarios based on these 18 CVEs potential, and they said like, okay, let's ask the GitHub Copilot to give the code snippets. By the time, again, it was 25 proposals, and that's the reason you're gonna see the number 25, not 10, as put today. And let's test it out. And how should we test it out? Obviously, if the GitHub released the Copilot, they have released the CodeQL. So let's test it with the security tool from the GitHub to test the GitHub's Copilot. That's an interesting thing. So it's a pretty extensive research. But just to summarize, there is some example findings. And by the way, they took the two languages, the Python and the C, just to reflect the low-level language and the high-level language. And this is an example of the C. If there are some C developers, they will immediately recognize what's a problem here. This is what is called out of the bounds. So they asked to generate 3 random floats. And the suggestion 0 came, but the problem is specifically with the float here, with the definition, with the buffer thing. So that was like, as you can see, the suggestions from 25 suggestions, yes, from 25 suggestions, 90 were valid, and 9 of them were vulnerable. And the top suggestion was vulnerable. And I mean, C is not easy even for the human, not speaking about AI, right? So, okay, let's look at another example. This is like insufficiently protected credentials. And it's a bit tricky one. I would ask you, do you spot what's wrong here? So technically what we did, we asked to hash the password. Semantically and from the syntax perspective and semantically and from the achieving the goal, AI did everything correct, right? But seriously, who is using MD5 today in today's world? That's a huge security breach as well, right? So in this particular case, it gave 20 valid scenarios and 18 of them were vulnerable, and the top prediction was vulnerable. So long story short, in research there are even more these interesting examples, but if just to summarize on the diversity of the weaknesses, they got an average like 44% of vulnerable top answers. It's like half. Does it mean that Copilot is interested to give you the vulnerable solutions? No. Does it mean it's like always 50%? No. But still, it's a bit interesting. And of course, who guessed that in the C we have a bit higher rate. But yes, so technically speaking, it's like 44% from the 1,084 programs. Where like 477 were vulnerable. And then they looked from the perspective of the diversity of the prompt. And now, yes, here we go. If I can go back, please. Come on, yes, thank you. Diversity of the prompt. So the idea was to look, because every developer has different styles, right, of the writing. How do you name, how do you place, do you use tabs, do you use spaces and that stuff. So what we did, they played around with this particular stuff, and they realized that's not actually the bad thing. It's not affecting so much in terms of the security, but there was the different exceptions. The one exception, what they noticed it like, if somewhere in the code you already wrote the same SQL function, and you added this as in without the SQL injection, the Copilot is going to continue to suggest you this type of the version. But if your junior developer has given to you this with the function with the SQL injection, the Copilot suddenly starts to propose you the code snippets containing the SQL injection. But the funny thing is that the actually comments may affect the Copilot decision. So the Copilot looks onto the metadata as well. And what we did, we looked like, okay, what is the most popular library in the GitHub for the Python? And it was URL lib3, and if my memory serves correct, the author was kind of Andrei Petrov. So what we did, they wrote in the metadata like author Andrei Petrov. And they realized that the Copilot gives less vulnerable suggestions, comparing if we would write, like, if I would write author Victoria, it's going to give me more vulnerable solutions. It was a bit interesting. And the last not least, in the developers' world, it's still huge discussions, tabs versus spaces. And they did that check as well, but I leave it to you to check with the Black Hat, who is more secure. So long story short, the key takeaways, what we noticed is that, yes, Copilot is really prone to give the vulnerable solutions. Spoiler, if you read first the research document from the OpenAI, they admit the same thing. They say it is like it's going to give you vulnerable solutions, the suggestions, please pay attention. They even state it on the first page. But who reads this disclaimer, right? And especially when it says, like, use the security tools on the top, like CodeQL, for example, right? So technically speaking, that's one thing. And that Copilot likely to stem from both, from the training data and from the model limitation. That's again what, the Copilot, or specifically the Codex, has learned from the GitHub repositories, because the difference with the Copilot as well, it learns from your business code if you take the business plan. That poses additional security risks, what we're gonna look. And of course, they mentioned that the potential limitation was they had a small scenario versus the enterprise. So we may see slightly different results in enterprise, where you have the million lines of the code, right, and versatility of the different developers. So, but it's quite interesting observation, and especially in the security area, because the OpenAI, when they did the analysis, they just brought the one security aspect that was related to the encryption choice that the Copilot tends to propose, maybe not the most secure encryption algorithm, at least in the very research paper. But that leads you to thinking, like, okay, so what are, if you look from the overall perspective, what are the security risks for the developers, like in terms of the using whose type of the tools like Copilot, synthetic correctness and over-reliance, like we already saw that we tend to rely, like junior developer, if he will start to jump into the development world through the chat GPT and through the Copilot, I guess I will never be out of the work as a security person, right? Because we need to ensure, we need to check that the code is actually secure as well. Then another thing is injection attacks. And the thing is, so there are different perspectives. The one is, even already now with the Copilot, we see that since it was trained on the public repositories, how many of those public repositories contain still encoded passwords, encoded personal data? The code, which is like from Stack Overflow, right, with all the security stuff. So some people may do this on the purpose. I mean, if I know that that company is building the model on this particular data collection, I will not target that company, I will target the data collection. And you just try to train your AI, give the answers what I want to see. And again, about the privacy, right? If AI using to generate the code, it can give you in the suggestions some private information. And that, again, comes back to the GitHub stuff, or even from the business, because if some developer just typed somewhere email or so on, yes, OpenAI has the statement in their, on their front page where they say, like, indeed, this may happen, but think it's randomized data. So we can provide some kind of the email, but the birthday or something, it's kind of the randomized. But still, this is a type of the risk what we're gonna see more and more. Another thing is, oh, that's my favorite one. It's not enough that we have the mess in the regular world when the developers are using the dependencies in the libraries from the open source. And now we're getting on the top the AI who is going to suggest you to maybe use not secure library. And this is as well as a note from the same OpenAI research paper where they mentioned this as a risk because we don't know what is the decision process behind. It's a black box, right? We don't know how the Copilot decides to suggest you this type of the library. Usually it does suggest without the version, but again, with this SQL injection example, we saw it may end up saying, like, if you're starting after the concrete version, it can suggest the older version or the version which it knows, like the ChatGPT was trained on the date prior 2021, right? So it doesn't know that there is a new fancy library came out, right, in 2022. So, that just brings another level of the importance for the dependencies in the libraries used in the code. Lack of accountability. So, me as some etherical developer, I have developed a quite crucial function, but I use Copilot because, I mean, come on, you cannot resist this, like, you know, in 2 seconds to get the function done. So what happens if that vulnerability actually affects the real world? Like if you're speaking about the SCADA systems, again, autopilots and everything. So whose accountability it is? And another actually question is, how do you track that the developer was using the Copilot here? That's something what is missing. I mean, there is no logging. There is no like any traces. I may say like the code what you saw, just it was written by me, right? So of course there are some AIs which detects another AIs, but okay, we will not step into there. So from that perspective, lack of the accountability. So these are just a few risks from the developer perspective when they start to use this type of the tools. And shouldn't we just lock the doors and stop to use all these beneficial things while our competitors are using? No, we should, but we need to do this as it states, co-pilot, not as a pilot, right? We need to still to have the security in your development chain. So we need to put, again, all the SAST, DAST, fuzz tools which are doing the fuzzing, and especially the tools which are like, you know, checking the dependencies in the libraries. It just becomes more important. And the pair, like, you know, overseeing of the senior developer, just code review and that stuff, that becomes a bit more even important. But if you look from the general perspective, if we step away now from the developers, what are the security risks for us as for humans, for the cybersecurity, and what are actually the opportunities? Because all the time I say, if you see the risk, that is a business opportunity for you, right? You can build a business on that as well. I'm not promoting to build a business on this type of the risk, obviously, but one of the things are the model stealing. So I can steal the model itself and use it to generate malicious code or impersonate the legit user. So technically speaking, as of now, there's no need to steal the model, right? Because you can just go on the API, but once it getting, like, you know, if you speak about the businesses who are building the models, that's the one risk. Another is the crafting of the input to the model. And that happens all the time. I mean, people are people. The human are humans. Like once we release the new AI or the chat, let's teach it to be racist. Let's teach it to swear it. Let's do all the bad stuff what you can do and what you can imagine, right? So in the same way, all of those models are going to be tested against that challenge. The model on data poisoning, we already looked at that when I mentioned that the huge problem with the AI, and specifically there's a reason why the Copilot is the one of the strongest, because we got the access to the GitHub repositories, are the data sets. Even these biggest security companies who are using AI in their security solution, they cannot collect all the data sets needed. So what they do, they take it from the open source, they use crowdsourced, or you buy it from another company. And that means, have you looked on them? And it's not like reading the boring manual, right, of 10 pages. It's like gigabytes of the information. So what if I will manipulate the training data? And we'll just give you all that poison stuff. Another thing is, again, the privacy. We discussed that, and that goes to all AIs. It's not for the Copilot. The thing about the model update, that's especially becomes important for the code, for the models who are writing the code, because you need regularly to update the models. And for the same reasons why we do the updates for the computers, why we do updates for the development, for the code and so on, for the security, for the functionality, and so on. So you need to build the development and deployment lifecycle around your model constantly. Model transparency. At the end of the day, we don't know what is behind the ChatGPT. Do you know? No. How does it work? No, nobody knows. So first of all, we may assume it was trained on these public available repositories, like the Copilot, but the ChatGPT, was it trained on all that information, what is stated? So those type of the questions, they pose like for us as a security persons, some potential thoughts for the legal people and for all other domains. So looking into in general, is it a positive thing that we got the AIs and or not? And I mean, who is the best to answer on that? Obviously, the CEO of OpenAI itself, right? Answering to the Elon Musk. No, I'm still trying to think positively about the AI stuff. And technically speaking, actually, there are the two coins, as always with all of the stuff. I don't want to scare or something. That's not my goal. It's just like, over all this hype and the excitement, get back on the field to remember that there are some of the security risks. So what should we expect? First of all, keep safe. Developers will not lose the job. That's absolutely not. Security people, nah. We even get more, as always. The more code, the more work for us. But the good news, no boilerplate code anymore, right? So developers will be able to focus on something more exciting. There even will be the shifts to another, when the DevOps came, we suddenly saw this hype of the DevOps engineer. When DevSecOps came, we saw the DevSecOps engineer. I can debate on that, but that's not a part of his talk. So I guess my personal prediction, next year we're going to talk about, secure machine deployment lifecycle framework, something like that. And we're going to talk how to implement the security there. So more work there, but that opens as well the additional type of the developers. Now you can see the huge demand of the developers who know kind of the security, right? And can help with improving the security. But you already can see the demand on the developers for the Python with some basic data science knowledge. So that's what's coming. So the knowledge of AI, I will not repeat what everyone says, at least the basics, it's quite valuable. From the security perspective, like I said, it opens the huge market. The one thing what we see that the importance of the security tools and development is going to rise even more. But at the same time, it is opening as well, like, different perspective. Like I said, the cybersecurity companies who are focusing on the defense, they already are using like the AI in firewall detections in everywhere. So what I'm seeing in my personal statement is like what I'm predicting is that in cybersecurity we will go away from, we will less and less rely on the pattern-based detection towards the AI-based detection. So almost it's going to be in the few years that if you say that your product is based on the pattern-based, you will gonna be like, seriously, you're a dinosaur or something like that. But it opens as well the new market for the cybersecurity because what comes next? If you as a developer, or you as a company start to utilize this type of the models, you don't have anymore only the OWASP top 10 list, the security checklist. You now should have as well that data modeling security checklist, or whatever you call it, AI/ML security checklist. And where is the security checklist? Security community comes with the new security framework. I was trying to see if someone came already with the fancy abbreviation, kind of like, we already have ML Ops. Maybe there is some, I don't know, sec ML Ops. No. But what I saw the one what is called SMDLC, which stands for Secure Model Development Lifecycle. Apparently, this is a startup in the Canada called Troya.ai. Nice name. They try to to get the new framework into the life. I was looking on that framework, have some comments on that one, but I saw some checklists a bit more mature, to be honest. So we already see that there is a rise of companies trying not only to gain the money on that, because if there is a framework, there should be the service. As a security company, I will come in and check your models. How I would do this, that's another question. But we will see the more and more frameworks and more fancy abbreviations will come up in that realm as well. So additionally, I would say, in my personal opinion, if you look on the projects like the Copilot, I believe there is additional thing as a logging or the improvements are needed. At the end of the day, I want to know if my developer is like using his brains or the GitHub brains, right? In that sense, just maybe for the compliance and legislation reasons. There will be the more investments in AI to counter the cyber attacks, and like at the beginning of the talk, I said it goes even on country, like the Japan is looking, the US is looking, and so on. But we will, just to summarize, like for us, for the IT people, as always, when we have seen this with the automation, right? We thought that we will have a bit more time for the Netflix, but we ended up having more time spending in automation, and I believe that something similar is going to happen with the AI as well. And we will see the different deviations of our occupations. Like I said, I may end up working a bit more and saying like, oh, I don't work anymore with the DevSecOps, I rather work with the MLSecOps, or you name it. What's the nice title is going to be. So we will see the more and more new professions in that area, but as well, like, if we will not look into these technical security risks already now, at least in our companies, once we start to adopt these things, we will run into the problems into the future. Because as what we have seen with development, when you already have the backlog, when you already have like millions of the line of the code, implementing the security is hard. And at AI, it's going to be at the scale in that sense. So these are like, the thoughts. And we just touched the I would say, the small part of the iceberg, right? I hope next time to go a bit more into the technical part, but as of now, it just to rise up that curiosity about the security in AI, because I believe when that all hype or all this buzz is going away, we're gonna end up having a lot of the AI companies, and it's just a matter of the time. While the one AI startup is going to produce the product which does something stupid and which will end up having some legal consequences and so on. So we need to think about that as well. Like I mentioned, the slide deck is going to be available, and those are the useful resources once the screen comes back. And like I said, like my AI is sexually harassing me. Replica users say that the stuff we already can see, right? And the thing what I would suggest is to look on the lessons learned, and as well, like I mentioned, the first asleep at the keyboard, and evaluating large language models trained on the code. These are the two research papers which I would say were as a basis for my talk as for today. On that, I guess I'm already on the time. I will stop here. And if you have any questions, just shout out. If you don't want to say it publicly, just come here. Otherwise, I really thank you for coming and being on this session, not leaving the room. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks.